Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. We now stand 10 years past the midpoint of a century that has witnessed 4 major wars among great nations. Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry. American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well. But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together.
Return. On the 25th anniversary of the event in 1994, Neil Armstrong made a rare public appearance and held back tears as he spoke these brief cryptic remarks before the next generation of taxpayers as they toured the White House.
Today we have with us a group of students among America's best. To you we say, we've only completed a beginning. We leave you much that is undone. There are great ideas undiscovered, breakthroughs available to those who can remove one of truth's protective layers.
If you saw this in the skies over South Florida, would you call me and say, hey, Rob, get a news camera over here? There's something weird going on? Well, these formations appeared last night in the sky over downtown Phoenix, as you see there. The same light formation appeared over parts of Arizona 10 years ago. Now, a movie was made on the formation of the lights, which was released a couple of weeks ago on DVD. But the Federal Aviation Administration says there's a simple answer to the mystery. They're military flares. Get another look at these lights. You can see them on CBS4.com. So nothing to worry about there. Nothing.
Military flares. Invasion.
Fife Symington is now a businessman. He was the Republican governor of Arizona for 6 years, elected when the first George Bush was president. Now, a decade after leaving the State House, he takes me to a Phoenix park and discloses something unlike anything uttered by any other high-level U.S. politician.
If you had been here 10 years ago and standing out here and looking up there at the lights and the view, you would have been astounded. You would have been amazed.
Governor Symington is referring to what is now known as the Phoenix Lights, an object videotaped by many and seen by thousands over several nights in the Arizona sky in 1997.
Major sighting here.
It was described by witnesses as larger than a football field and silent.
It was a giant V, all right? And the right side of the V went over us. The left side was like a couple blocks over it.
We just didn't know what to do. You know, it was just like, my God, how big is this thing?
The great state of Arizona, Fife Symington.
The former governor, a Vietnam Air Force veteran, had never publicly acknowledged seeing it until now.
And I suspect that unless the Defense Department proves us otherwise, that it was probably some form of an alien spacecraft.
So why didn't he say anything then? Partly, he says, because he didn't want people to panic.
I think as a public figure you have to be very careful about what you say, because people can have pretty emotional reactions, and I said my goal wasn't to try to stir the pot.
And he went to humorous and controversial lengths not to stir the pot. He held a news conference after the Phoenix Lights to announce the mystery had been solved.
And now I'll ask Officer Stein and his colleagues to escort the accused into the room so that we may all look upon the guilty party. Don't get him too close to me, please.
In the alien costume, the governor's chief of staff.
Now, this just goes to show that you guys are entirely too serious.
UFO enthusiasts were not amused, especially since the governor was believed to have seen nothing. But now he's coming out.
The lights were really brilliant, and it was just fascinating. It was enormous. It just felt otherworldly. You know, in your gut, you could just tell it was otherworldly.
Symington will be talking about this in an updated film about UFOs called Out of the Blue. He has also talked with an organization that wants UFO information more out in the open.
It's very significant that someone of the stature of a governor would come out and say that they acknowledge that they experienced a UFO, because it brings a lot of credibility and strength to the case.
Governor Symington says he did tell his family, friends, and staff about what he saw early on.
I still, behind the scenes, tried to investigate it, but I got nowhere.
So what were the Phoenix Lights? Well, frankly, we don't know. What we do know is that it's as much of a mystery today as it was a decade ago. Gary Tuckman, CNN, Phoenix.
Although many believe there is overwhelming proof that the mysterious lights seen over Phoenix at 10 p.m. were caused by military flares, several intriguing questions remain. Why didn't the aircraft which deployed the flares show up on radar? What caused the similar phenomenon seen and recorded on video by Steve Blonder 3 days earlier?
Right there. I see it. See it right there, right there.
And finally, what can explain the V-shaped formation that passed over Arizona between 8:15 and 8:45 p.m.? Only one known videotape of this UFO event exists. And while today no one has come forward with a viable explanation, there are plenty of theories about what was streaking through the night skies of Arizona on March 13th, 1997.
I personally think that this is military and that it is some kind of a humongous stealth. And that's my personal opinion.
Could be anything from a stealth aircraft or a black project, could even be a military weapon that's actually creating like a hologram image, and that's why the description varies on the shape and makeup of the object.
If this was a large, top-secret military aircraft, why are they flying it over one of the largest metropolitan areas in the country with the lights on? What's up with that? You know, and so for that reason, that theory is hard for me to accept as the answer.
There's just not enough evidence to convince me that it was tactical aircraft or something from another world. It's somewhere, it could be somewhere in between. I mean, there's just no way for me to know.
Some believe that the key to solving the mystery of both events may lie in the reaction and actions taken by military officials on the night of March 13, 1997. Jim Delatoso is convinced that any flares released that evening were directly related to the V-shaped UFO seen between 8:15 and 8:45 p.m.
But what probably happened is that unknown aircraft of unknown origin penetrated into military airspace. And this has happened before. And the U.S. Air Force deployed planes to follow these unknown aircraft. And the military aircraft flew in a circle around the state, released flares as a decoy, and the unknown objects went away. Maybe they'll be back.
On the night of March 13, 1997, there were two separate incidents involving unidentified flying objects in the Phoenix, Arizona area. The first event occurred between 8:15 and 8:45 p.m. The second, just after 10 p.m. The first event involved a V-shaped object first spotted near the town of Paulden. It traveled on a southeasterly course, passing over Phoenix at about 8:30 p.m. Just after 8:45 p.m., the V-shaped object turned and disappeared somewhere northwest of Arizona, near Kingman. Although seen by hundreds of people throughout Arizona, only one known videotape exists of this phenomenon. It was captured on tape by a retired pilot from the front yard of his home in Scottsdale, north of Phoenix.
At about 8:28 that evening, I was outside with my video camera and happened to look up, right about up in there, and saw a formation of lights moving from north to south. The V formation that flew over consisted of between 5 and 6 amber lights only. Over a period of somewhere between 15 to 20 seconds, there was an apparent change in the position of some of the lights within the formation. The perceived altitude would have been 10 to 15,000 feet, and that would have probably been somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 to 400 knots, given the distance that they traveled. But it was totally silent, completely and totally silent.
Although Terry was the only eyewitness to actually record the mysterious V-shaped object on videotape, many other people throughout Arizona reported seeing the UFO that evening. This computer-generated illustration was created by artist Tim Lee. Tim and his entire family witnessed the event from their home in north central Phoenix.
The right arm of the object went directly over this house, over the property, and the left arm of that was probably about 2.5 blocks over in that direction. So when it came over, it pretty much dominated this whole quarter of this little valley up here.
You could see that between the lights on each arm was solid. There was no stars. You could not see any stars between each light.
When it came over, it wasn't moving or wavering back and forth. It wasn't floating or jumping. It almost was like a computer simulation of some kind. It was so straight.
Members of the press, the American public, and people of the world. We are here today to disclose the truth about a subject that has been ridiculed and questioned, denied for at least 50 years. The men and women who are on this stage and the some 350 additional military intelligence witnesses to the so-called UFO matter and extraterrestrial intelligence can prove and will prove that we are not alone. I would like to thank Sarah McClendon, who is with us today, the famed White House correspondent, for her sponsorship of this meeting. In 1993, a group of military advisors to this project and I met out in the countryside in Virginia, and we decided that it was time for civilians, military, intelligence, and other people to come together to disclose the truth about the subject which is called UFOs. Since that time, I have personally briefed a sitting Director of Central Intelligence, James Woolsey, President Clinton's first CIA director. I have personally briefed the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, the head of Intelligence Joint Staff, members of the Senate Intelligence Committee, many members of Congress, members of the European leadership, the Japanese cabinet, and others. And what I have found is that none of them are surprised that this is true, but they are uniformly horrified that they have not had access to these projects. We can establish through these witnesses whom we have identified, which now number over 400, and these are people who have been inside the CIA, NSA, NRO, Air Force, Navy, Marines, Army, all divisions of the intelligence and military community, as well as corporate witnesses, contractors to the government. And these are folks who have been involved in so-called black budget or covert unacknowledged projects. These unacknowledged special access projects are taking in at least $40 to $80 billion per year. And they are sitting on technologies that can change the world forever. The reason we are coming forward now is that we are asking for the U.S. Congress and for President Bush to move towards an official inquiry and disclosure on this subject. It has the most profound implications for the human future, for the U.S. national security, and for world peace. Specifically, technologies connected to UFO and extraterrestrial vehicles, if declassified and used for peaceful energy generation and propulsion, would solve the looming energy crisis definitively, would end global warming, would correct the environmental challenges that the Earth is facing. It is also critical that we begin to debate as a society the propriety of placing weapons in space. If indeed, as we can prove, it is true that we are not alone and that space is territory which we are sharing with other civilizations, it could be a very imprudent, destabilizing thing to place weapons in space. This is not being debated because it is off the national and international radar screens. It needs to be placed on it, and we are here today to do it. We can establish through this testimony that these objects of extraterrestrial origin have been tracked on radar going thousands of miles per hour, stopping and making right-hand turns, that they use anti-gravity propulsion systems, which we have already figured out how they work in classified projects in the United States, Great Britain, and elsewhere. That these objects have landed on terra firma, at times have been disabled, and have been retrieved specifically by teams within the United States, that extraterrestrial life forms have been retrieved, and their vehicles have been taken and studied thoroughly for at least 50 years. We can prove through the testimony and documents that we will be presenting that this subject has been hidden from members of Congress and at least 2 administrations that we are aware of, presidential administrations, and that the Constitution of the United States has been subverted by the growing power of these classified projects, and that this is a danger to the national security. There is no evidence, I wish to emphasize, that these life forms from elsewhere are hostile towards us. But there is a great deal of evidence that they are concerned with our hostility. There are times when they have neutralized or rendered inert the launch capabilities of intercontinental ballistic missiles. Witnesses here today will describe those events to you. They have shown clearly that they do not want us to weaponize space, and yet we are proceeding down that dangerous path. And it will be established that these projects, because they have not been supervised properly by the Congress, by the U.S. President, by the international community, have become a threat to the national security. And for this reason, we feel we must disclose the facts. This is the beginning of the campaign for disclosure. And in a memo that I wrote to President Bush last week, I stated that this campaign will persist until our goals are met, and they are as follows. That we have open, honest hearings on the subject in the U.S. Congress. That there be a permanent ban on the weaponization of space or the targeting of any objects of extraterrestrial origin. That there be a full and complete study of classified technologies connected to this subject to see how they could be properly declassified and applied for peaceful energy generation so that the world may get off of fossil fuels. This is a matter of the most pressing import. It has been ridiculed, yes. I know many in the media would like to talk about little green men. But in reality, the subject is laughed at because it is so serious. I have had grown men weep who are in the Pentagon, who are members of Congress, and who have said to me, what are we going to do? Here's what we will do. We will see that this matter is properly disclosed, and these courageous witnesses, the first 21 of over 100 that we have already interviewed on videotape, have stepped forward to speak the truth. Now, I expect people to be skeptical, but not irrationally so, because these men and women have come forward and they have their credentials, they can establish who they are, and they have been first-hand witnesses to some of the most important events in the history of the human race. As was pointed out to me by some of the men here, they were charged with handling the nuclear weapons of the United States. Their word was trusted on everything of great importance for the national security. We must trust their word now. As Monsignor Balducci said at the Vatican, in an interview I had with him recently, it is irrational not to accept the testimony of these witnesses. So please be skeptical, but that is not the same as prejudiced and closed-minded. This is a matter of great importance, and I ask the media, the scientific community, and the political community to look seriously at this matter and to do the right thing for humanity and for our children. We have available for the media and for members of Congress a nearly 500-page briefing document with transcripts from dozens of these top-secret witnesses. We have a 4-hour videotape summary. It's not a commercial product, I'll warn you, from this project of the 120 hours that we have in interviews so far. They've been boiled down to 4 hours, and it's available for the Congress to review and for the major media to review. We can establish that this subject is real and has tremendous significance for the human future.
Pentagon, the day before 9/11. Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld declared war, not on foreign terrorists.
The adversary is closer to home. It's the Pentagon bureaucracy.
He said money wasted by the military poses a serious threat.
In fact, it could be said that it's a matter of life and death.
Rumsfeld promised change, but the next day, the world changed. And in the rush to fund the war on terrorism, the war on waste seems to have been forgotten.
My 03 budget calls for more than $48 billion in new defense spending.
More money for the Pentagon when its own auditors admit the military cannot account for 25% of what it already spends.
According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
$2.3 trillion with a T. That's $8,000 for every man, woman, and child in America. To understand how the Pentagon can lose track of trillions, consider the case of one military accountant who tried to find out what happened to a mere $300 million.
We know it's gone, but we don't know what they spent it on.
Jim Minery, a former Marine turned whistleblower, is risking his job by speaking out for the first time about the millions he noticed were missing from one defense agency's balance sheets. Minery tried to follow the money trail, even crisscrossing the country looking for records.
The director looked at me and he says, "Why do you care about this stuff?" It took me aback, you know. My supervisor asked me why I care about doing a good job. So.
He was reassigned and says officials then covered up the problem by just writing it off.
They got to cover it up. That's where the corruption comes in. They've got to cover up the fact that they can't do the job.
The Pentagon's Inspector General partially substantiated several of Minery's allegations, but could not prove officials tried to manipulate the financial statements. 20 years ago, Pentagon employee Franklin C. Spinney made headlines exposing what he calls the accounting games. He's still there, and although he does not speak for the Pentagon, he believes the problem has gotten worse.
Those numbers are pie in the sky. The books are cooked routinely year after year after year.
Retired Vice Admiral Jack Shanahan commanded the Navy's Second Fleet the first time Donald Rumsfeld served as Defense Secretary.
With good financial oversight, we could find $48 billion in loose change in that building without having to hit the taxpayer.
In the 2.5 minutes since this report began, the Pentagon has spent nearly $2 million, and it may never know where 25% of those tax dollars went. In Los Angeles, I'm Vince Gonzalez for Eye on America.
I've always wanted to ask this question, and I'm going to use my position to ask it quickly. When I was at your library, that's not that bad, don't worry. When I was at your library opening, I was standing in your replica office, Oval Office. It's an incredibly powerful feeling. I've never been to the White House. I'm not a Republican, but I looked at your desk, and I was wondering, from president to president, whether you pass a list along of secrets that only you and a couple of President Bush Sr., President Bush, Jimmy Carter, Gerald Ford know, like where's Jimmy Hoffa, or what really happened at Roswell. So without giving away any state secrets, is there something we can all look forward to in the future to read about that you know that we don't know that will really make the National Enquirer required reading?
I don't know if you all remember this, but there was actually, when I was president in my second term, there was an anniversary observance of Roswell. You remember that? People came to Roswell, New Mexico from all over the world. And there's also a site in Nevada where people were convinced that the government had buried a UFO and perhaps an alien deep underground because we wouldn't allow anybody to go there. And I can say now, because it's now been released into the public domain, I had so many people in my own administration were convinced that Roswell was a fraud, but this place in Nevada was really serious. There was an alien artifact there. So I actually sent somebody there to figure it out. And it was actually just a secret defense installation, alas, and doing boring work that we just didn't want anybody else to see. So I can't think of that. I'll give you a serious thing, though. I spent a lot of, in 2000, I was able to participate with Tony Blair and representatives of the French, German, Japanese, and Canadian governments in announcing that we had succeeded in sequencing the human genome. And perhaps some of you have investments in all these biotech companies, and now you know we cloned Dolly the sheep, and now apparently they may have cloned a dog, and we were all talking about this. My own view is that assuming we don't do something stupid like burn ourselves up with global warming or blow ourselves up with a military conflict we could just as easily avoid, I think a lot of these biotechnology issues will be the dominant sort of intellectual and ethical challenges of the lives of those of you who are 10, 20, 30 years younger than I am. Because I think that we are going to be able to save people's lives that, you know, in my generation couldn't be saved. And we are going to come up against the limits of our own mortality in a way we never could before. And a lot of the things that happen, good and bad, will be stranger than anything ever written in science fiction. But I don't know the answers, which is one reason I would like to live to be 100, just to see what happens.
So that means there's a list or no list?
What? What did you say?
I was just joking. The list,
you should have said, I don't know what you said, but you should have said there's absolutely no risk of that. Given my misspent youth, I'm lucky to be here now.
What I did say was that there really is no list, or there is a list. The secrets.
If there is one, I don't know it. I mean, I really, the Roswell thing, I think, really was an illusion. I don't think it happened. I mean, I think there are rational explanations that I have succeeded, and I did attempt to find out if there were any secret government documents that reveal things, and if there were, they were concealed from me too. I wouldn't be the first president that underlings have lied to or that career bureaucrats have waited out. But there may be some career person sitting around somewhere hiding these dark secrets even from elected presidents. But if so, they successfully eluded me, and I'm almost embarrassed to tell you I did try to find out.
Well, that...
I do believe, by the way, I'll be just as one more flaky, that you can also be flaky when you're out of office. I believe that now that we know there are not hundreds, not millions, but billions of other solar systems out there, thanks to the Hubble telescope and what we know about black holes in the universe and all of that, the dimensions of physics are such that I would be quite surprised if in the lifetime of people that are no older than 30 here, we don't discover some form of life in another universe. It's pretty clear that there was something approaching elemental life on Mars at one time in the past, based on what we've already discovered there. So I say that only to say this. I hope all of you, wherever you live, will continue to support space exploration. Whether manned or unmanned is not so important, but we have to keep doing that. And I'm afraid that there will be a waning interest in it in the future. I think it's a great mistake. I think we should continue to explore the boundaries of our existence, both into the earth and beyond the skies. When I was president, we discovered in the bottom of the Amazon River, we were just a small part of this, but 2 previously undiscovered forms of marine life so deep in the Amazon that they had never been found, and all the efforts of marine biologists. So I think there are lots of interesting discoveries, biological, on Earth, and other discoveries in the heavens that those of you who are younger will get to see unfold. You'll have all kind of problems with them, but on balance, it'll be a plus. And it'll make life much more interesting.
Well, as usual, 90 Minutes with President Clinton is never dull. It's a really wide range of subjects, and I thank you all very much for participating today. Please join me in welcoming the President, thanking the President for his
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
About 3 days and 200,000 miles into the flight, Mission Control did miss the significance of a cryptic message from the astronauts.
Do you have any idea where the import is with respect to us? Stand by.
The crew required information on the current position of the S-4B, the final stage of the rocket, which had been jettisoned away 2 days earlier. This short message hit an extraordinary turn of events. Apollo 11 wasn't alone in space.
There was something out there that was close enough to be observed, and what could it be?
Traveling alongside Apollo 11 was a mysterious object, like this one filmed on a later mission. If the object wasn't part of Apollo's rocket, it could be only one thing: a UFO.
Mike decided he thought he could see it in the telescope, and he was able to do that. And when it was in one position, that it had a series of ellipses. But when you made it real sharp, it was sort of L-shaped. That didn't tell us very much.
NASA knew very little about the object reported by the Apollo 11 crew. It was obviously an unidentified flying object, but such objects were not uncommon, and the history of even Earth orbit space flights going back over the previous years indicated that several crews saw objects.
Despite having a clear view of the UFO, the crew were wary of reporting it to Mission Control.
Now, obviously, the three of us were not going to blurt out, "Hey, Houston, we got something moving alongside of us, and we don't know what it is. You know, can you tell us what it is?" We weren't about to do that, because we know that those transmissions would be heard by all sorts of people, and who knows what somebody would have demanded that we turn back because of aliens or whatever the reason is. So we didn't do that, but we did decide we just cautiously ask Houston, how far away was the S4B?
Unaware of the drama unfolding in space, Mission Control radioed the position back to Apollo 11.
Apollo 11, Houston, the S4B is about 6,000 nautical miles from you now, over.
And a few moments later, they came back and said something like it was 6,000 miles away because of the maneuver. So we really didn't think we were looking at something that far away. So we decided that after a while of watching it, it was time to go to sleep and not to talk about it anymore until we came back and debriefing.
To this day, whatever it was the crew saw has never been positively identified or officially acknowledged.
The possibility that you might encounter aliens in space has to be considered in a very sensible and positive and realistic way. There were a lot of people within the program who went off later and became convinced that UFOs existed. And that led to some concern on NASA's part, where they got the agreement of the crew never to publicly talk about these things for fear of ridicule.
Oh, hey, here's John. Hey, John.
Hey, Jim, how are you?
Well, fine, thanks. How are you?
Busy with this UFO stuff.
Oh, my God. Did you see it hit the Fox crawl Monday night?
Did it? It's just been everywhere. I mean, I've been on CNN. My fourth appearance today.
Really?
Every MSNBC, every network.
Oh, my goodness.
And just worldwide. I mean, Australia, everywhere.
That's what we're going to start off. I'm going to say, and John, the response has been, well, out of this world, hasn't it? Congratulations. So where's the latest on the investigation in the FAA, then?
Well,
is by this time tomorrow going to prove
United is now acknowledging that they were approached by employees. So they've done that flip-flop. And I'm trying to locate photos of this. I'm told there may be photos.
Really? Wow. That would be cool. I'm told that the story on CT has almost 1 million hits.
Yeah, it's the most read story in the history of CT.com.
You're kidding me.
I got an email yesterday from Bill Adee.
Wow.
I mean, it's like, the entire history of the website.
Oh, incredible.
So.
Incredible. So does the possibility exist you might get the pictures and get them in for tomorrow? Or?
Oh, no, I don't think, no. I mean, I'm told the pilots on that plane that was being pushed back, you know, I said in the story that they opened the windscreen and stuck their head out. Now I'm being told that one of them had a digital camera and snapped some pictures.
Wow.
So United's not playing ball with me, and FAA, I've expanded my FOIA to include the flight plan, which might include the pilots' names. And I'm trying to work with the union as well.
Are they still going by weather phenomenon?
FAA, you know, pretty much because of the federal holiday, I haven't talked to them that much. But yeah, they haven't changed their story, and I've just heard from other people, you know, since then that, you know, that explanation just doesn't wash.
And they haven't gone out of their way to say anything otherwise so far?
No, I mean, they say, you know, it was November 7th. They're moving on. They're just doing their daily thing.
Well, I tell you what, all the people who saw it must be feeling a little validated right about now, huh?
Oh yeah, and I'm getting tons of emails from other people who outside the airport as well as at O'Hare, who also either cited that same object or saw the hole in the sky and said, "What is that?"
Wow. Okay, so what did it look like again to the folks who saw it? It was a saucer-like object hovering over the United terminal, right?
Yeah, directly over gate C-17. And it was stationary in the sky, dark gray metallic, you know, like I say, saucer-shaped, no lights, and it was there for some minutes. And then when it disappeared, it just streaked through the clouds with such energy that it broke a big blue hole in the overcast, and the hole remained there for several minutes until the wind drifted and pushed the clouds back together.
So the blue was the sky.
Yeah, the blue was the sky, but otherwise the entire skyline was cloudy.
Totally overcast, huh? Man.
So you know, it's nothing. An airplane just doesn't react like that. It does. It slices through, and it doesn't disturb the atmosphere.
Man. Do you have other interviews set up after this, John?
Yeah, I'm going back on a radio station, a couple of radio stations this afternoon, and then Headline News has a show I'm doing at 3 o'clock.
Okay. Ooh, I'll have to watch if I'm... Yeah, we'll have to set by then. Okay, Australia, what other international?
Oh my God! I mean, all over Europe.
Oh my gosh!
You know, hearing from people, you know, Ireland, they say, you know, we heard about what's happening at O'Hare.
I mean, Butch O'Hare.
I mean, just as well as serious, you know, researchers at major U.S. universities who've attempted to do their own investigations, and when they go to the government to try to get information, they get stonewalled. So there really is this universal feeling that the government knows a lot more than it's willing to tell.
Man, okay. Okay.
I'm just going to say...
Okay, here we go. I am so... I think it's so cool that I was the first one to get to talk to you about it.
That's right, last Friday.
Yay. Okay. The UFO O'Hare story the Chicago Tribune exclusively broke on New Year's Day is garnering attention around the world. Joining us now to talk about it once again is Tribune transportation writer John Hilkovich, who broke the story. And John, the response has been, well, out of this world, hasn't it?
Yes, it has been astronomical, Jim. Every major country, it seems, people have written in, both those who claim they've spotted UFOs during their life, as well as serious researchers. I mean, just the last 2 days, this is my email, and these are the serious emails. You know, the ones from kooks who said they were brought aboard alien spacecraft, I put in a circular file. So it's just a story that has legs, and people are fascinated by the thought, and I think there's some belief that there are advanced life forms that are visiting us here on a regular basis.
You've been contacted now in the last few days by several countries, but that also includes serious university researchers here in the U.S. You know, I got to tell you, too, I got a call from my dad in California Monday night, and he's like, what is up with the O'Hare UFO story? I'm like, where did you see that? Where did you read that? Well, it was on Fox Network's Crawl. at the bottom. It's just amazing how much this is garnering.
Yeah, it really is, and worldwide attention, as you say, and from people who have observed, made observations themselves, including on November 7th, the date of this incident, additional people both at O'Hare and outside the airport who have either seen this gray disc-shaped metallic object themselves or they saw that huge hole in the sky that the object created when it vanished.
Let's go over that one more time. What did people see when it all of a sudden vanished right through the clouds over the United Terminal? And then how's the FAA been reacting the past few days to? Any new ground on that?
Okay. Well, the object was hovering in a stationary position about 1,500 feet above the United Terminal for some minutes. And then when it left, it just burst through this thick cloud layer, creating a large open space of blue sky on an otherwise overcast day. It took some minutes for that opening to close up when the clouds drifted back together. And it's just extremely unusual, according to the witnesses. I mean, airplanes just don't react like this. They slice through clouds, and they really don't disturb the atmosphere that much, except for the wingtips and such. The FAA is still, pinning this to some kind of weather phenomenon, that some lights from the airport and the overcast skies somehow got together and created this image. But weather experts, astronomy experts, others that I've talked to said that that's bunk. That explanation just doesn't wash. United, on the other hand, after first denying that they got any reports from employees about this sighting, is now saying, yes, indeed, their employees did approach them immediately because of concerns about safety.
And to reiterate, John, the witnesses who originally came to you are all seasoned, professional, credible professionals like pilots who saw this.
They're pilots, they're senior managers, they're mechanics, and others. So, they are very truthful about what they're saying, and we're trying to locate photographs, if they do exist, of this incident.
Well, John, we know you have plenty of other interviews to do today with other countries, so we'll let you go and we'll keep our eyes to the sky. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim.
This is just incredible. Isn't it amazing what really garners people's...
Yeah.
For various reasons, I suppose,
Yeah.
How cool.
Yeah, no, it's...
I can't wait to see in a week where this stands,
Yeah. And I'm just amazed I'm still getting requests for interviews because...
Yeah. Cool.
Okay,
thanks, John.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay.
Would have landed, but...
Okay, illegal aliens may be a serious problem on our southern border and on the northern border. But what about the aliens who may be crossing another border? Oh, yes, the border above. That's right, we're talking about outer space, aliens, extraterrestrials, LaToya Jackson, you know, they're here, they're among us. More and more people believe that space aliens may be coming. Now, listen to this story, because this is an actual news story. This isn't like out of the Weekly World News. Chicago O'Hare's airport recently, the United Airlines employees claim they observed a flying saucer-like object hovering low over the terminal for several minutes before bolting through the thick clouds with such ferocity that it actually left like a creepy hole in the cloudy skies overhead. So what was it? A hoax? An alien attack? Were they observing us? Is this a military operation? What is it? Joining us now is UFO historian Richard Dolan and the guy who actually broke the story. His name is John Hilkovich. He is from Chicago, and the Chicago Tribune. John, let me start with you. The UFO witnesses in Chicago, they're not nuts, are they? They are like really fine, upstanding people.
And they're very serious about this. They're all United Airlines employees, ranging from pilots to supervisors who heard chatter about this on the radio and raced out and saw it in the sky, aircraft mechanics, veterans of O'Hare who've been there for a long time, know how lights can play tricks in the sky, and they say this wasn't that. This was a real metallic gray object low in the sky, and they want answers.
Okay, do you believe them? Do you believe them that they believe it, or do you believe that they really saw what they think they saw?
I believe that what they're reporting is real, and they were concerned about safety. They're not necessarily saying that this is a craft from another galaxy, but they're saying this is a unidentified flying object low in the sky over the world's second busiest airport. It could pose a collision risk. Who knows, a security risk in this era post 9/11.
Okay, look,
and
Now, let me go to Richard here. I'm sorry to interrupt, but let me go to Richard for just a second and ask you, because isn't this the same kind of thing that when we had the new stealth fighters out, everybody was saying, it's an alien spacecraft. No, it's just a secret military aircraft that we hadn't announced for years in advance. Is there a possibility that you think that this is just some sort of military aircraft that we haven't released, that we have?
Sure, anything's possible, Glenn, but if you want to go that route, then I think what you need to do, to be honest about it, is go back through the decades and indeed generations of reports that we've collected of these types of objects that people have been seeing. And let me just add that this is a phenomenon that not simply civilian people have been dealing with, but U.S. military personnel have been encountering what appear to be UFOs. I don't know what else you would call them. Objects that military pilots have frequently said are disc-shaped, that look exotic, that behave in unusual ways, and that have violated sensitive airspace time and again for many, many years. So if this is a secret covert project, as many people have speculated, it seems to be going on in a rather confrontational, provocative way.
Okay.
That really doesn't have any explanation.
All right. So, John, you think that this is there was some sort of a cover-up. At least the FAA was not real honest with you when you first asked, right?
Well, yeah, I went to the FAA and they said they have no reports of this at all. I put them a Freedom of Information Act request, and then they got back to me several days later saying that in reviewing the communication tapes at O'Hare, they did come across chatter involving this object, and that a United supervisor contacted the FAA manager in the tower and asked if the controllers had seen anything unusual. Also, United Airlines told me that they had no reports of this, even though the fact is that they were interviewing up to a dozen employees who reported observing this, asking them to write reports, draw pictures. After my story broke on Monday, United said, well, yes, we have been talking to these employees.
Okay, so Richard, why would United, why would give me an explanation of why these guys would be hiding this stuff?
Well, I mean, one reason just might be that they're embarrassed to come out and say that, oh, yeah, you know, we've got this UFO hanging out over O'Hare and we don't know what to do about it. Let's face it, if you're running a large corporation or a bureaucracy, the last thing you want to do is stick your neck out on an issue like this. And so it doesn't surprise me at all. And in fact, this is, again, part of a long history. FAA, as well, has not always been forthcoming over many, many alleged cases. Witnesses have seen these very bizarre things for years and years, and it's very tough to get a straight answer out of a lot of government agencies or other corporate bodies.
All right, but then, John, let me go back to you and ask, I mean, geez, I saw Saddam Hussein hung with a cell phone camera. How come there's no pictures? Are there pictures? Is there video? Is there anything? Here it is over Chicago and O'Hare Airport. How come we don't see any visuals?
Well, pictures haven't emerged yet, but I'm told that the flight crew that was being pushed back, one of the pilots did open the windscreen, look out, did identify this object, and he had a digital camera. He may have taken some pictures. We're also hearing other reports that there may be photographs from camera phones and such, that United Airlines may be aware of this, and I'm working, believe me, to find these witnesses.
Okay, if anybody has information on those witnesses, how do they get a hold of you?
Jay Hilkovich at ChicagoTribune.com.
Yeah, I mean, if you got pictures, man, send them in, because I'd like to see them, too. Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Now, let's check in with Nancy.
A possible motive in the brutal killing is tied to a Las Vegas strip club.
He's the Las Vegas man who claims he can summon UFOs on command. Pretty wild. So we sent Action News reporter Mike Dellastreto to get the real story. But what he found shocked everyone and could leave you wondering, are UFOs real?
And forget the short-term fixes and diets that don't work. Kathy Ray has a plan for every lifestyle to help you win the battle of the bulge.
Breaking news, solving problems. This is Channel 13 Action News, live at 11.
Good evening, and thanks for joining us. I'm Trisha Keene.
And I'm Steve Wolford. Well, let's take another trip back into the realm of paranormal tonight. Last night we had ghost hunters, now UFOs.
That's right, and there is a Las Vegas guy making an extraordinary claim about extraterrestrials. So we sent Action News reporter Mike Dellastreto to check it out. Mike?
All right, guys, just listen up here. This guy says the Old Testament, written in Hebrew, taught him how to summon UFOs. All right, he says he can also do this on command, and he adds he's been doing it for 25 years, keeping all of it secret until now.
These beings are here. They are here. They're just sitting right up there.
We met up with Prophet Yahweh, seer of Yahweh, at Doolittle Park off Lake Mead. We picked the day, we picked the time, and we picked the location.
Everyone's going to think you're absolutely nuts. Well, I thought I was absolutely nuts.
Until he says he saw UFOs. Over the years, 1,500 of them.
If we make it 1,501 today, what do you think? I'll try it.
He says the voice in his head told him to go public now, so we took him up on his offer, and we scanned the skies. Nothing but a few clouds. When the prophet started praying for a sighting, I wasn't exactly convinced.
I pray, oh Yahweh, that you send a sighting so that they know that I am not mentally ill. I am not a false prophet, like those who seek to kill me say I am.
I see something straight up.
Oh, brother, look at it. There it is.
You can barely see it, a white speck. Then another sighting.
There it is. I got it.
Photojournalist Jonathan Hawkins locks in on it. Let's take a closer look here. It's an orange sphere that appeared out of nowhere. I call the boss with an unexpected change in my story. I can see it clear as day. In fact, it's bright.
I can't believe this.
It's moving pretty fast.
It's going to Nellis Air Force Base. It wants to be seen.
We called Nellis to see what these things might be. Guess what? They didn't call us back. But this thing started coming back toward us.
Yeah.
It's coming toward us now, I think.
What?
See, it's coming up toward us.
Whoa, man! Oh, hallelujah!
Then, a few seconds later, it disappeared.
It's going back up in space.
Prophet Yahweh isn't concerned. He says it'll be back. And I'm still not quite sure what those things were. Now, if I didn't see this for myself, I probably would have just laughed this whole thing off. Prophet Yahweh says, though, this is just the beginning. He says we're going to see a lot more of these things starting next week. And he says one will come down low enough for all of Las Vegas to see. Mike Dell'Ostrito, Channel 13 Action News.
Interesting. You know what? If anybody knows what that was, please call Mike Dell'Ostrito and identify that object.
So, Jerry, do you mind if we play the X-Files theme song while you do work?
Yeah, really.
I think I can handle it.
Yeah.
No comment on that. Let's, from a scientific point of view, let's go right to early warning desert Doppler. And, you know, that's not the best for picking up UFOs, but I'll tell you, it's pretty good for thunderstorms, all kinds of wacky convective activities in the atmosphere.
Now, though, the politics of UFOs. Mexican Air Force pilots capturing on videotape what are said to be 11, count them, 11 UFOs. Unidentified flying objects. They are officially that. Bright objects, some sharp points of light moving quickly across the sky. The tape called historic by some. Members of the Mexican Defense Department saying it's the first time UFOs have had the backing of any country's armed forces. Now, a group of activists calling on the United States government to end what it says is an embargo on the truth about extraterrestrial life. What is that thing on your screen? With us now from Washington is Stephen Bassett, founder and executive director of the Extraterrestrial Phenomena Political Action Committee. Last time he was here, he was running for Congress, was unsuccessful in that venture. But I will ask you today, sir, the Mexican government, the Mexican military says, hey, we took these pictures, these are UFOs. What was that, do you know?
This is significant for two reasons, Shepard. One, this is released by the Defense Ministry of Mexico. This is a message being sent to the United States government that Mexico and many other governments are losing patience with our government's intransigence in ending this embargo. Other messages have been sent by France in 1999 with the Cometa report, and by the United Kingdom when they released a substantial number of documents regarding the Bentwaters case in 2000. Many countries know about the extraterrestrial presence, but they deferred to the United States with regard to the timing of when disclosure would take place. But they're simply losing patience.
How do we know this, by the way?
Well, we know it by paying attention. I've been following this now for 10 years. We call it the politics of disclosure, the disclosure process. Hundreds of government witnesses in this country have come forward, and other governments are putting pressure on our government. The media hasn't covered it thoroughly enough, Shepard. If it did, it would learn about some of the things I'm mentioning here, and also learn about thousands of other videos and photographs that have been taken over Mexico by Mexican citizens since 1991.
There's absolutely no question about that, and his number, thousands, is accurate since 1991. Thousands of pictures and videotapes of discs, but never anything like this taken by such sophisticated cameras on board military vehicles.
Oh, there's been plenty of...
But not as clear and widespread as this and government confirmed in this way. I'm just saying that these are unusual in that
Oh, no,
way.
it's happened many times before, but this is the first time it's been released. Believe me, there is evidence like this in the archives of every major first world government in the country, but they release this publicly in a news conference in Mexico City. That's the difference.
Studies have been done that, quote, clearly indicate the likelihood of an extraterrestrial explanation. But there are people sitting out there, I'm hoping there are millions of people watching at the moment, who are saying, this is nutty. Why, you know, why do we even talk about such things?
The polls show otherwise, Shepard. CNN, Time, Reuters polls, last 10 years, consistently, 50% of all Americans believe the extraterrestrial explanation accounts for these sightings. Up to as many as 90% of Americans believe the government is outright lying. The polls are unambiguous. Year after year, the same thing. In fact, if you could talk anonymously to people, even in Congress, probably 50% of members of Congress already convinced that the extraterrestrial presence explains this phenomena. Disclosure is at hand. It is very close, and the American people need to prepare themselves very soon for an announcement from our government that there is, in fact, an extraterrestrial presence engaging this planet and the human race.
All right. Well, there you have it. Very interesting. Thank you. We'll try to find out more about the lights, and the next time there's a congressman around, I'll ask him. Probably not on the camera, but I'll ask him off the camera. So there's something to feed on.
A las 7, a la misma altura. Hay unas nubes ahí, se debe de ver esto. Pero, a ver, busquen eso que viene atrás de nosotros.
¿Ve cómo se ve? Se ve como en dos faros.
Viene como a las 7, 8 de la posición. Lo raro es que trae una punta adelante, un puntito adelante. A ver, radar, ¿qué tenemos? Nada, señor. A ver, permítame, déjale busco. ¿Y nosotros? Comandante, ¿qué es eso?
¿Qué distancia más o menos lo tenías, Telles?
Oye, a ver, abusados, es como... Ahí van más, siguen más atrás. Son 10, 11 objetos. Son muchos objetos. Afirmativo. Ahí van. Va, uno. Y ahí van los atrás. Siguientes. ¿Qué es eso, Dios mío?
¿Se anda correteando?
¿Qué es eso? A ver, trata de enfocar. Máximo. Ok, no dejes que los dejes atrás. Ok. Van.
Sigue ese, no lo dejes, Telles.
Van todos, van aproximadamente como 10.
Como
¿Ya lo dio? ¿Ya lo dio? ¿Qué van pasando?
Tú
van a no lo pierdes. Sí. Ahí van.
3, 4, 5, 6. Son 6.
Abajo o arriba. En medio, ahí van
a ir 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Qué barbaridad, Ahí se van a ver bien. Y van a una velocidad, pero... 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 en la pantalla. Síguelo, no lo cierras.
¿Están a la misma altura, Telles?
Afirmativo. Poquito, arriba. 8, 9, 10, 11 contando toda la cola. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11. Ok, no sabemos qué estamos viendo, son unos objetos nada más luminosos que vienen a la misma altura que nosotros. Pero no podemos saber qué distancia. ¿Por qué nos vienen siguiendo?
The Mexican Air Force has released a video that some of you are going to find difficult to believe. A journalist says it shows images of UFOs tracking a Mexican military plane. He says Mexico's defense secretary gave him the video, which was allegedly taken by the pilot during a patrol. The pilot says up to 16 lights were tracking his aircraft. The Mexican defense secretary says images like these have never been released to the public by the armed forces of any country.
And they're saying scientists can look at them and try to figure out what they think, if they're really...
Gordon Cooper is an American hero, one of the Mercury 7, our first astronauts. He was the last American to travel into space alone. Before he became an astronaut, Cooper was an elite Air Force test pilot. That's when he witnessed an amazing sight. A fleet of hundreds of UFOs.
Yes, they were flying quite high. How high we couldn't tell because we couldn't get anywhere near their altitude.
Following standard procedure, Cooper filed a report. The official response puzzled him.
They were probably high-flying seed pods, which didn't sound very logical.
The military often claims that UFO sightings are simply weather balloons.
I chased one time in an airplane, and boy, it really looked like a big saucer very high, and I had an afterburner going and got as high as I could get in this airplane. And as I started pulling up along close to it, I had a very shamefaced look on my face when I realized it was a big weather balloon with the radio package hanging under it.
A few years later, at Edwards Air Force Base, Cooper had another UFO experience. This time, his camera crew actually filmed it.
As they were sitting there filming, a little saucer came from, I say a little saucer, it was a saucer, came flying over their heads, put down 3 little landing gear and landed right out on the dry lake bed. And they picked up their cameras and started over toward it, filming as they went. And when they got in fairly close to it, it lifted up, put the gear back in the wheel wells, tipped up, and took off at a great rate of speed. I sent them over to develop the film, and then had to go through all the proper regulations of reporting this. And we wound up having to send the film forward to Washington in the base jet airplane. And I don't know whether anyone's ever seen it since.
The alien craft was strikingly similar to the ones he saw a few years before.
Basically the same planform vehicle. They were double saucer, lenticular. But if you're going to be going in and out of atmospheres like Earth or other places might have, you certainly need a little more aerodynamic type of vehicle. And the saucer has the capability of going through the air at tremendous rates of speed and handling the bow and trailing wave without making shock waves. So it can be very silent while traveling at big rates of speed through the atmosphere.
Cooper has yet another account.
Yes, a friend of mine who's a captain on a major airline. At night, was flying along, noticed this, suddenly a big glow came off his left wing. He looked out and this big saucer was sitting right off their wing. And so he turned slightly toward it and it moved away, and turned back and it moved back in position. Turned to his co-pilot and said, do you see what I see? And he said, oh God, yeah, I do. And it trailed along with him for quite a period of time and tipped up, climbed very steeply away.
Astronauts have reported several UFO sightings from space, but Cooper believes only one of them is true.
To my knowledge, the only thing that was ever seen on any of our space flights, and believe me, all of us would like to have seen something, was on Jim McDivitt's Gemini 7 mission, where they saw this glint of something metallic off in the distance, and he reported it, and nobody had it listed on the ground, so he tried getting a picture of it, but the sun, unfortunately, was glinting off. It was bright. All you got is just a glint. There was no detail on what it was. And never any further sighting at all.
In a letter to the UN, Cooper laid out his opinion on UFOs.
I would like to think that they're going to really release all the information.
Cooper believes we are not alone.
No, I've always felt that there are a lot of other planets that have life on. With all those numbers of potentially habitable planets out there, I think we're kind of vain to think that God would habitate only one of them.
Pilots, investigators, scientists, and researchers from 7 different countries gathered in Washington to discuss their shared experiences about UFOs. 14 people participated in this conference, including a former governor of Arizona, Fife Symington, who said he saw a UFO above southern Arizona in 1997. Other speakers included a retired Iranian Air Force general who said he tried to shoot down an extraterrestrial vehicle but says all his controls went haywire, to a retired Air France captain who says he and most of his passengers saw a huge flying disc. That's me right there asking a question. Perhaps the most, I'm not one of the panel, perhaps one of the most unusual stories, though, came from a U.S. Air Force security officer who, while on assignment at a base in England, was summoned to an aircraft that landed in the nearby forest.
During the evening of 29 November 1989, in a small area in eastern Belgium, approximately 140 UFO sightings were reported. Hundreds of people saw a majestic triangular craft with a span of approximately 120 feet, powerful beaming spotlights, moving very slowly without making any significant noise, but in several cases accelerating to very high speeds.
Now, that's a retired Belgian general. I was telling you earlier about that former member of the U.S. Air Force in England. He said he saw a craft in the forest while they were looking at it. There was no doors or windows on it, but it looked like something they'd never seen before. And then all of a sudden, he claims it just took off and disappeared. And I asked him, I said, did you see any people? Did you see any beings? He said it was too small to have any people. I said, but if they came from a different world, they'd be maybe little tiny people. Anyway, he said he never saw any people. The thing took off, and he believes, he doesn't know what it was, but he says it was nothing that he's ever seen on the planet Earth before. Either way, the purpose of this conference, Nicole, was to try to convince skeptics this is a worthy field of study and to request that the FAA investigate such sightings. The FAA has told us before that it, quote, doesn't have the power to investigate either way until a sighting one day results in an aircraft landing and its inhabitants doing interviews with people like us, Nicole. There'll be a lot of doubt about these claims.
This is amazing. And you know what? I can't help but laugh about this because I'm so surprised that some of these high-ranking officials are coming out and becoming almost a new face for UFO enthusiasts out there, because when you think of people saying, oh, hey, I saw a UFO, you kind of think of freaks. I'm not going to lie. Were you surprised to see them there?
I think a lot of them admit it took a lot of courage to get there. I mean, a lot of them are afraid to talk. They think that people think they're freaks or crazy. I will tell you, though, Nicole, that the people we talked to today seem to genuinely believe they saw these things. And in many cases, they probably did see something. Maybe it wasn't from another world. And not everyone who was on this panel, Nicole, thought for sure it was from another world. They just can't explain it. And that seems to be the more typical explanation we hear from people, because we've done a lot of stories about these kinds of sightings over the years. And make no mistake about it, there are tens of thousands of sightings worldwide over the last few decades. But the very important point to bring out, while these people may have seen something unusual that you can't explain, the fact is, until that day comes when someone lands from a different world and goes on television and we see them, I mean, that will be an amazing story. I can't wait to cover it if it happens, but it hasn't happened as of yet.
Of course. You know, it was the goal to make believers of you and I, of course, but what else are they trying to do? Get more funding for research? I mean, what was the point of talking about all of this?
I think a lot of the genuine enthusiasts here are very insulted that the U.S. government has no body to investigate such sightings. Other countries do, and that's why some of the people on the panel are from these other countries today. For example, you have these Air France pilot, retired French military officials. They say France has a body that does investigations. The United Kingdom has a body that does investigations. You're supposed to report this stuff right away. But in the United States, there's nowhere really to report this. There was a sighting over O'Hare Airport in Chicago last year, and the FAA, that's when the FAA told us we don't investigate these kinds of things. And there were a lot of people at O'Hare who said they saw something hovering above the airport. No one's quite sure what it was, but they were kind of encouraged that, you know what, it was probably weather phenomena.
I'm Fife Symington. In 1997, during my second term as governor of Arizona, I saw something that defied logic and challenged my reality. I witnessed a massive delta-shaped craft that silently navigated over the Squaw Peak area in North Phoenix in the evening, and it was truly breathtaking. To my astonishment, it appeared to be a solid structure. It was huge. It had a very distinctive leading edge with huge embedded lights in it. And it was just traveling quietly, made no sound, through the Arizona night sky. I still don't know what it was. As a pilot and a former Air Force officer, I can definitively say that this craft did not resemble any man-made object that I'd ever seen. And it was certainly not high-altitude flares as put out by the Air Force at Luke Air Force Base, because I've never seen flares fly in formation. The incident was witnessed by hundreds, if not thousands, of people in Maricopa County and in southern Arizona. I was never happy with this silly explanation. There might very well have been military flares in the sky that evening, but that sure wasn't what I and what hundreds of my fellow citizens saw.
When the pilot first reported the UFO, he described it as a huge ball with lights running around it. He said it was about 4 times bigger than the 747 he was riding. And remember, the 747 has an elevator. And he's looking out the window and he sees something that's 4 times the size of his aircraft. He said he saw it with his eyes, his lying eyes, he saw it. The co-pilot with him saw it, and the other crew member all saw it visibly.
Both objects were of a flattened disc shape
with a dark area to the right. They were brilliant yellow with light emanating from within, and I estimated them to be up to possibly a mile across. I found myself astounded but curious, but at 12 miles distant these objects were becoming uncomfortably large, and I was glad to descend and land the aircraft.
During Air France flight 3532 from Nice to London on 28 January 1994, I observed with my crew a UFO in broad daylight near Paris. This UFO was in evolution and it looked like this, with a bank angle of 45 degrees. It seemed to be a huge flying disc. It stabilized and stopped moving.
In a small area in eastern Belgium, approximately 140 UFO sightings were reported. Hundreds of people saw a majestic triangular craft with a span of approximately 120 feet. Powerful beaming spotlights moving very slowly without making any significant noise, but in several cases accelerating to very high speeds.
The witnesses then observed a landed spherical 3 meters diameter UFO at a distance of 80 yards, with 4 occupants near it. Very high luminosity was reported after slow takeoff, leaving physiological effects on the witnesses' eyes that were confirmed by the village mayor. The hiss noise described by the 2 witnesses was also heard by the hunting guard of the village. The UFO acceleration after vertical takeoff was estimated to be about 100 Gs by Japan experts. The occupants were seen floating in the air while entering the craft from its top, at first in a hurry.
Close encounters with UFOs. Is national security on the line? High-ranking government and military officials from around the world have seen what you won't believe, and they risk their reputations to make the case. They're here, and so is Shirley MacLaine, who's had her own spacecraft sightings and can't wait for the chance to get on board. Next on Larry King Live. Good evening. A historic occasion will take place in Washington on Monday. Former high-level government employees, military officials, and pilots from all over the world will come together. They'll discuss their own UFO sightings and encounters, and they'll do it at the National Press Club in the nation's capital. Some of them will share their stories for the first time. This group has gathered together to call on the United States government to take an active role in investigating cases involving unidentified flying objects. That's the topic of our program tonight. Our panel here in Los Angeles, Fife Symington, the former governor of Arizona, who in 1997 ridiculed an infamous UFO sighting by thousands of people in his state and later admitted that he himself saw a craft. James Fox, the filmmaker who is the executive producer of the award-winning feature-length documentary Out of the Blue, the definitive investigation of the UFO phenomenon. Colonel Chuck Halt, United States Air Force retired, was the deputy base commander of Brentwaters Woodbridge, a U.S. military base in Suffolk, England. And in 1980, Chuck and his patrol investigated an internationally known UFO encounter in Rendlesham Forest, close to the Brentwaters Woodbridge case. Sergeant Jim Peniston, U.S. Air Force retired, was a Woodbridge security supervisor at that base in 1980, says he sat with a UFO on the ground for 45 minutes before it hovered above him and shot into the air at an unearthly speed. And in Copenhagen, Denmark, is Nick Pope. For 21 years, Nick was a government official for the British Ministry of Defense. From 91 to 94, he ran the British government's UFO project at the Ministry of Defense, where he researched and investigated the UFO phenomenon for the British government. Fife, are we now saying that the United States is taking this seriously, or is this just an event?
I think the United States is taking it seriously, and they need to. It's long overdue. The issues that James has so courageously tackled with his production deals with really the very top sightings around the world, and he's brought this group together for this press conference on Monday, and I think it's a great public service that he's providing.
And you're going to moderate it, right?
I'm going to moderate it, yes.
You were certainly a skeptic, right?
Originally, I was a skeptic.
And what changed yourself with sighting?
Well, I was part of the Phoenix Lights Over Phoenix event back in 1997. And I saw a wedge-shaped craft of enormous proportions fly over what we call the Squaw Peak area in Sunny Slope in Phoenix the night of the event, and it was something to behold.
James, you haven't cited it, right? You just did the film.
Yes, I've spoken with a lot of high-ranking military and government officials from several countries.
What got you involved to even do the film?
Well, it was an interest I had of mine. And it was a personal investigation, I guess, and I started to document some of the stuff on camera, and the next thing I knew, I ended up with the film.
And
12 years later.
Will you be there Monday, too?
Absolutely, yes.
Are they going to show that film in Washington?
No, we're not. This is just to establish the fact that the phenomenon is real, and it's happening worldwide.
Colonel Halt, the United States Air Force retired, was Deputy Base Commander at Brentwaters Woodbridge. That's a U.S. military base in Suffolk, England, right?
That's correct.
Is it still there, that base?
It's still there, but the base is now closed.
Okay.
It's been returned back to its civilian owners and made into council housing, something like Section 8 housing.
What, if anything, did you see?
I saw some lights I couldn't explain. Very unusual lights. I don't mean just a light like a bulb. I saw something that was oval-shaped, maybe 10, 12, 14, 16 inches across, had a black center. It sort of winked, and it appeared to be dripping something like molten metal off it. It moved horizontally through the trees, avoiding trees, occasionally bobbed up and down a little vertical distance. It came toward us at one point. It receded. We were very concerned, but we tried to approach it to see if we could get close enough to discern what it was. It actually moved out into a farmer's field beyond us. We got up to the edge of the field. We looked at the object, watched it for a few minutes. I was very concerned because the object was illuminating the farmhouse behind it, and I wasn't sure whether there was some damage being inflicted on the people that lived there or what. Suddenly the object just exploded silently into 5 white objects, and it disappeared.
What time of day?
This was about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
Did you report it?
Oh, my, yes.
One thing I want to say quickly is that I think the objects overhead were far more interesting. The next series of events.
While we were in the field investigating, and we were actually looking for maybe burn marks on the ground from what was apparently dripping off this object, we noticed 3 objects to the north in the sky. They initially were elliptical. They were illuminated with multiple lights and were moving at high speed in sharp angular patterns. We noticed 2 objects to the south. One of them approached us at very high speed and sent down a beam. I would equate it now to a laser beam at our feet.
Who's the we, Colonel?
There were 5 of us. I took 5 people out to investigate.
What did your command superiors say?
At that time, my superiors were silent. It was 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I was communicating with the command post. I did take an audio tape. In fact, I brought the original tape recorder with me. It's a little linear tape recorder that I carried around the base. And I made a tape recording, which is about 15 or 20 minutes long. It's rather famous now.
And did you play it for them?
Oh, definitely. I played it the next day.
What did they say?
Well, my boss took it to the 3rd Air Force commander to the staff meeting the following Wednesday and played it for the staff. The reaction of the staff, from what I'm told, is they didn't know what to do. And the general at that time said, well, it happened off the installation. It's a British matter. Let the British handle it.
Were you there, Sergeant Peniston?
I was there on the first night. I went off base to check out a possible aircraft downing. I thought it was an aircraft crash, and I took my team with me. And when we got to the wooded line off the East Gate, we discovered a craft of unknown origin. It was triangular in shape.
On the ground?
On the ground.
Did you touch it?
Touched it, walked around it, photographed it. We did a full investigation of it on the ground for 45 minutes.
Any sign of anything in it?
There was no exterior openings, no crew compartments, no intakes, no engine compartment that I could observe. It was a very smooth fabric craft. It was black in color with lighting running through the fabric of the craft.
Were you frightened?
Yes, it was. I was very concerned.
Where's your logbook? Can you show
in my
your logbook with the symbols on it?
Yes, as long as when I was taking notes, it was progressively got worse. Matter of fact, you can barely read my writing by...
And then it took off, right?
After 45 minutes, then it powered up with lighting and went to tree level and took off. And
did it make sound like an engine?
Absolutely no sound and no air displacement.
Just up?
Up and gone.
And the symbols, I think they're showing the symbols right now, sorry.
Yeah, there are the symbols. We'll check in with Nick Pope in a moment. Do you believe there is extraterrestrial life? Head to our website, cnn.com/Larry King, to vote. There's also a special guest commentary by Governor Symington about what he saw in the Arizona skies. It also had Shirley MacLaine. We'll be back with more right after this. Copenhagen. Colonel Holt, investigating the area days later, he's here with us now, Colonel Holt, ended up seeing something himself. Listen to this audio tape.
There's no doubt about it. There's some type of strange flashing red light ahead. There's yellow. I saw a yellow tinge in it too. Weird. It appears that he may be moving a little bit this way. Yes, it's right on past that. Yellow. It's coming this way. It is definitely coming this way. Well, we've got an object about 10 degrees directly south. 10 degrees off the horizon. And the ones in the north are moving. One's moving away from us. It's moving out fast. There's one on the right heading away too.
And we have with us, he brought it along, Colonel Holt's notes that he kept while this was going on, right?
Actually, it's Sergeant Penniston's notes.
Yep. Your note. Yes. I'm sorry, Chuck. It was Sergeant Penniston's notes. You kept these while you were viewing this thing?
Yes, we needed the times and that for, log entries and stuff like that. It's routine. Yeah.
You missed the symbols on that. The symbols are so fascinating.
Routine activities, not a routine event.
That's right.
Let's check in with Nick Pope in Copenhagen, 21 years, a government official for the British Ministry of Defense. Nick, what do you make of all of this?
Well, the Rendlesham Forest case was certainly one of the most compelling UFO incidents in the British government's files on this. And critically, one of the very important things about is that I don't know if the Colonel has spoken about the radiation readings that were taken at the landing site. Well, the British government defence intelligence staff subsequently assessed those radiation readings as significantly higher than background levels. So there was a real tangible, solid piece of evidence to back up this extraordinary testimony.
Nick, does the British government take the same position as the United States government, as if to say it doesn't exist?
Well, the position is broadly similar, but having said that, the Ministry of Defence still does have a small UFO project, although investigations are somewhat on the back burner these days. But, I think there are still cases being reported to the government. There are still, for example, many reports coming in from pilots, reports of UFOs being tracked on radar. And the Ministry of Defence says that it keeps an open mind about the UFO phenomenon.
Fife, what do you believe? Do you believe there is life somewhere else?
I would be astonished to find out, if it were possible, that we were alone in the universe.
Do you think?
I just, we're this wonderful planet in the Milky Way, surrounded by billions of objects, and the universe is such a big place. I just think that you have to be open to that possibility.
Isn't it also open to the possibility, James, that this is just phenomena?
Well, yeah, they're definitely phenomenon, but I mean, I think the people in a position to know what's really going on are about to disclose that on November 12th at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., and hopefully
you say
people
the government is going to disclose something?
The government officials from 7 countries, military and government officials.
Will disclose on Monday?
Yes, they will.
Yeah, this is an unprecedented gathering of top officials.
Why now, Colonel Holt?
I think there's greater acceptance now that there really is something there, despite the fact that there's kind of a stigma that goes with UFOs.
You believe that too, Sergeant? You think they're ready to come across and say at least there's something?
I think it's unavoidable right now. I think that there's been so much cases and so many points made over the last 20 years. I think it's overwhelming.
Nick, you think the British government is ready?
Yes, I think so. I think part of the problem with all of this is the stigma that's sometimes attached simply to the word UFO. And some colleagues and I at the Ministry of Defence actually tried to do away with that term and replace it with unidentified aerial phenomena, because we were certainly convinced that there were some serious defence, national security and flight safety issues here, even though we didn't know what the UFO phenomenon actually was.
What did this do to your head, Jim?
Well, I tell you what, it's a very difficult situation, and it had a terrible effect on also the airmen that were out there with me. Some won't go on camera, some will not talk about today. I think that it would probably cause a lot of... I had problems with, post-traumatic stress after it, that type of thing.
Psyche.
Yeah, it was a very traumatic experience.
We've got lots more to go. Our complete program tonight is devoted to unidentified flying objects. We'll interrupt our panel. We've been talking with military officials about UFOs. Coming up, we'll ask Shirley MacLaine what she thinks about these reports. That's next on Larry King Live.
Did you see a UFO?
I did.
I don't really know what happened to it. I saw one, but I don't know what, it just disappeared.
It's time to find out what the truth really is that's out there.
That such an investigation be taken.
Came to you eventually, and the police officer too. They're coming.
From a movie, don't take this as War of the Worlds. Don't go panicking out into the streets. She's an old and dear friend and one of the more talented people on the American scene. Shirley MacLaine, the Oscar-winning actress, author of a new book, Saging While Aging. All of her books are major bestsellers. There you see its cover. There's a lot in this book that we're not into tonight, but we're going to discuss one aspect of it, which is UFOs, fitting our subject tonight. By the way, Shirley came up during a recent Democratic presidential debate in Philadelphia. Tim Russert is asking Representative Kucinich about MacLaine's book. Watch. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we had it. They lied to me again. Anyway, many people react with laughter when they hear people talk about UFOs. How do you explain that?
I don't know. I think the unknown is traumatizing to people. I think we do have a built-in DNA of fear. One of the reasons I'm so interested in all this, well, I'll tell you how I got interested in a minute if you want to know, but I think the consciousness of how we relate to this phenomenon and the consciousness of change that happened to people who were taken aboard crafts, because I've talked to a lot of them.
Like the sergeant said, he's never been
He
the
was
same.
afraid. The whole idea of what induces fear is something they talk about a lot. It's, to me, I don't want to get into arguments, are they real or not, anymore. I've had too much experience talking to people all over the world, particularly in Peru, who have satisfied me. But what...
You believe in them?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I think maybe the problem with accepting it and the need to have a kind of curtain of humiliation drawn is that it confounds us relating to our religion and our belief in God. But what I found with the people, and I worked a lot with Johnny Mack, head of psychiatry at Harvard, old friend of mine, wonderful man, and he said that we have to get clear in our own heads, in our own consciousness, what God is.
And do you think this sort of to people tells us there is no God because there's
the opposite there. The opposite, because what they've told me is they're being taught two things. They're being taught that we are trashing the planet in a fierce way. Be careful. And then we're being taught that they too, even though they may be extremely superior in many technological ways, they're trying to teach us about the superiority of our technical spirit and knowledge that we haven't even touched.
Why do you think, just think, they don't land in downtown Washington?
Well, listen, I was 18 years old, Arlington, Virginia, where we lived. UFOs buzzed the Capitol and buzzed the White House on July 19th, 1952. I recorded it in my diary. No one knew what it was. The switchboards lit up. Everybody was confused. A few days later, Truman, who was president then, had General Samford go on television. I have the kinescope, actually, and say, look, they're not ours and they're not Russian. We don't know what they are.
And you got the form there that Jimmy Carter filled out?
Yeah, I found the actual one where he's got all of his handwritten notes.
He saw a sighting.
Oh, sure. Well,
you got the Vatican said something?
Yes. Now, this is interesting in relation to the question and problem of religion and God. Padre Balducci, wonderful man, Monsignor Balducci, very close to each pope. He has come out with a statement. You see how thick it is, so I can't read it. They're real. They have discussed what to do about it. Vatican intelligence would really like to discuss it. That's the problem here. We need the governments to reveal these files. The Chinese have done it. The Brazilians have done it. The French did it about a month ago, and it so lit up their switchboard it crashed their net. So I think the people are way ahead of military intelligence.
What is since they're not attacking us and they've been seen for years, what's the fear? What's the government's fear?
That's an interesting question. I've been working with Paul Hellyer. He's the minister, ex-minister of Defense Canada under Trudeau. He is upset because the Americans are planning the weaponization of space as though they are enemies.
Really?
Yes, and it is very troubling to him. It came out of a project called Project Paperclip, in which, and this is what Eisenhower warned us against, the sustention of the military-industrial complex. In order to extend the power and the funding of the military-industrial complex, you have to be afraid of things. Number one was communism. If that petered out, number two is terrorism. That's here for a while. Number three is asteroids, and number four is extraterrestrials. So there might be a built-in reasoning here to have induced fear just to keep military-industrial complex
You've
going.
talked to a lot of people over the years, right?
Yeah.
Astronauts, presidents, etc. And your belief is firm, right?
No question.
You think we'll ever know?
Yes, and I think there will be sightings, and I get the feeling, and this is where consciousness comes in, because all these guys who were talking about how they were afraid, etc., and I've talked to so many who had these feelings. It's all about feelings. It's all about what goes on in the spirit of your head. I think really the government in this country wants to release this information. Military intelligence does, because I know some of them, and I think they are watching what happens in terms of the public's reaction to
this conference Monday, then, is important.
Yeah, I think it's important.
Thanks, Shirley.
Okay.
Shirley MacLaine and her new book, all of her books have been bestsellers. The new one is Saging While Aging. We'll be right back with our panel, but as we go to break, here is the aforementioned clip, which we didn't have before, of Dennis Kucinich in a recent debate explaining to Tim Russert his encounter with a UFO.
They should ask Governor Richardson. He's the governor of it.
The godmother of your daughter, Shirley MacLaine, writes in her new book that you sighted a UFO over her home in Washington State, that you found the encounter extremely moving, that it was a triangular craft, silent and hovering, that you felt a connection to your heart and heard directions in your mind. Now, did you see a UFO?
I did, and the rest of the account, it was unidentified flying object, okay? It's like, it's unidentified. I saw something.
And he's looking on his radar, and he sees this big mass of something coming toward his airplane. It goes from his nose to the right, to the back, and it moves in 9 to 10 seconds. It goes from 6, 7 miles in front of him to 6 or 7, 8 miles behind him, and then back over to the left.
Welcome back. Our panel remains. Added to it is John Callahan, the former division chief of the Accidents and Investigation Branch of the FAA in Washington. He was sworn to secrecy about what we're going to tell you now. In 1986, a Japanese pilot said he saw twin cylinders flying in formation within 500 feet of his air cargo jet. He claimed the object was the size of 2 aircraft carriers and had followed him for over 30 minutes. Anchorage air controllers registered a radar target. The U.S. Air Force controllers reported seeing a blip, but moments later it was gone. This, I imagine, will also be discussed at this big meeting on Monday. John Callahan, what did you make of this?
Well, we went up to, when I got a call from Alaska about what to tell the media that was overrunning their office. When I asked him why, he says, oh, it's that UFO thing, you know, but who believes in UFOs? And I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. And he went on to explain how the 747 was chased for 31 minutes in Alaska. So I said, well, tell the media that this is under investigation and then send all that data, all the discs, the voice tapes, all the printouts to the FAA Tech Center in Atlantic City, and we'll go up and take a look. I went up to Atlantic City the next day at the FAA Tech Center, and I had the specialist up there play back what the controller seen on his scope, you would call it. And I had him synchronize the voice tapes to the radar so you could hear what was happening and look over the controller's shoulders if he was sitting there. And a blind man could see that there was a target along with that 747 where there shouldn't have been any target. And it came more than once. When we get all done with that, we had the specialist put out a chart that's about 8 to 12 feet long that showed every hit on the radar of the 747 and where the other targets were. The hardware people got up to explain what we were looking at, and they said, there's nothing wrong with the hardware. Everything over here is a software problem. The software people come up and said, there's nothing wrong with the software. Everything you're looking at here is a hardware problem.
And after this incident, you said that Admiral Engel, the then FAA administrator, held a briefing with members of the FBI, CIA, and President Reagan's scientific study team. What was the result of that meeting?
Well, he set the meeting up, and my task was to hand off this event to the Reagan scientific study team because the FAA does not handle UFOs.
And what did they do with it?
When we got all done with our briefing, it took a couple hours. A CIA man stood up and said, this event never happened. We were never here. You're all sworn to secrecy, and we're confiscating all this data. And
what do you make of that, Sergeant Penniston? What do you make of that?
Oh, that's exactly what happened with Bentwaters. I don't admit the deniability on it.
Why? Colonel, why? Why deny what they saw? I don't understand it.
That's puzzled me for years. The very interesting thing is I made a memo up, which is now public, through no fault of mine. I did not release it, is what I'm saying. And I fully expected an investigation. I have never been debriefed.
James Fox, who, by the way, has a new movie in the works called Beyond the Blue. His early one was Out of the Blue. Why do they deny it, in your opinion, as a layman?
I would say what you can't control, why disclose that information? Wouldn't it worry the public? I mean, their very job is to protect us, and yet they have no means of protecting us. Shall these things turn out to be hostile? I'm not saying they're hostile, but you know, they have no control of the situation. So why would they disclose?
Fife, is it that they don't know, and they don't like to say they don't know?
Yeah, I think that's human nature, don't you, Larry? People, especially if they're in charge and they're in the government, they don't like to admit that they don't control or they don't know something, because that means that if that's the truth, then there's a high degree of vulnerability out there, and the public might get very concerned about that.
Why would so many people, all of you like yourselves, be lying? Yeah. I mean, what's the point? First of all, you're generally humiliated. Yeah. You're kind of laughed at.
Well, I think less so now, and that's the purpose of this press conference on Monday, with very convincing new evidence that's going to be put out there, and I would hope that the United States government would start another Project Blue Book, or a very high-level commission that's instituted to really look objectively at these sightings.
I thought it was very interesting because the Air Force's official position is that they terminated Project Blue Book back in 1969, and they no longer investigate UFO sightings. But then you said that OSI investigated your case, and yet the order came from somewhere else.
Came from somewhere beyond the base, and it was not known to base officials. It was done through back-channel means.
So they did investigate. They're saying they haven't been investigating since '69. That's the official position, and yet they...
Weird.
Yeah.
We'll be back with more of this edition of Larry King Live as we further investigate the subject of UFOs. Don't go away.
And then the red light was sort of casting a glow over the whole thing, so it looked like a round disc.
People say, Mike, no, you saw a B-2 bomber. My response was, we could land all 40 of our B-2 bombers on the wing of that craft.
I would go ahead and feel the craft, which was warm.
Our panel remains. Joining us from Tucson, Arizona is James McGehee. He is an amateur astronomer and a retired United States Air Force pilot and a skeptic about all of this. Now, James, after all you hear and all you see, and these responsible people, these are not kooks coming off the street, doesn't that cause you to bend a little?
No, not at all, because what they're talking about is basically anecdotal stories, and all of these things are basically easily explainable. There's simply no compelling evidence that an alien spacecraft has ever visited the Earth. And if there were, then of course we would have scientists interested in this, and they're not. For this to be a real phenomena, i.e. spacecraft from another world, we would have to expect that the conspiracy would not only be among governments, among militaries, among the news media, but it also would have to be involved in all scientists and scientific organizations in the world.
So, James, are you saying that Colonel Halt and Sergeant Peniston did not see what they say they saw?
I think they misinterpreted what they saw. I think they saw lights that night. There was a Cosmos 749 satellite rocket booster that came down that night, a bright meteor fireball on the first night, and there was a police car driving around in the forested area that night with his lights on as well. On the second night, it's clear that from the tape, which the lighthouse has a 5-second period, and that he was actually looking at the lighthouse. It's also clear...
I'm sorry, go ahead, Jim.
It's also clear that the instruments they were using improperly. They didn't understand what they were doing. A starlight scope doesn't measure energy. It only amplifies photons. They were using a radiac meter in an improper way that was used for field measurements and not for point sources. I have actually walked the ground there. I have taken a very specific Geiger counter to measure the area. There's nothing but background radiation.
Let him respond. Chuck?
Well, first of all, have you ever seen a lighthouse move through the forest, Larry? Horizontally, approach you, recede from you, explode into 5 white objects, send down an equivalent of a laser beam, and do so into the weapons storage area? And I would defy anybody to take a police car into the woods. When Jim went out, he took a Jeep and he had to dismount because he couldn't go any further.
Do you think he's lying, James?
No, I think they're just misinterpreting what they saw that night. There were numerous lights out there that night. Let's put it this way. Where would it have been best to have viewed this object that night? It would have been best viewed from the Woodbridge Tower. I interviewed the people that were in the tower that night. They saw nothing. They heard nothing. There was nothing on radar.
The sergeant says it wasn't manned.
It wasn't manned that night. The tower was empty.
The ATC... the tower was manned that night, and the ATC facilities did have control that night. The British radar also saw nothing that night.
Let me get a break, and we'll come back with more. James will stay with us. We'll also ask him to talk to Callahan about that Tokyo plane incident. You're watching Larry King Live. Let's check in with Anderson for a UFO.
Well, I was the district governor of 56 Lions clubs in southwest Georgia, and I had to visit all the Lions clubs and make a speech. And I was outside a school lunchroom one night right before sundown. It was getting dark, and we were getting ready to eat supper. And I and about 25 men were standing around, and all of a sudden in the western sky we saw a strange light coming toward us, a round light, and it got closer and closer, and right above the pine trees it stopped. And then it began to change colors from blue to red to white. And then it stayed there for a while. We were all aghast. We didn't know what it was. And then it just disappeared into the west. That was the end of it. So it was a genuine UFO in that it was an unidentified flying object, but I have never thought and still don't think that it's possible for, you know, creatures from Mars to come here and visit us and go back home.
Before we have Jim McGahey respond to the story of that Japanese pilot and what he saw from his Japan air cargo jet, Sergeant Peniston wants to respond to something that James said.
Yeah, thank you, Larry. You know, it's just, I respect James for his opinion, but if I was in his position right now, looking at us and looking at this story, I'd probably have a lot of doubt about it too. But this is not about lights in the sky. This is about an object that has landed in a woods and was investigated by a team of experts that are familiar with aircraft identification and that, and there's just no way in the world that this could be anything other than it was a physical craft.
All right, Jim, he's saying he touched the object. He surrounded the object, and the object took off and went into space. That's either a madman.
Well, there's no evidence of that. I've never seen any evidence.
So then you say he's lying.
His report. No, I'm saying he may truly believe that he touched an aircraft.
That also flew.
Something called confabulation. But the question is there any evidence other than his anecdotal story, his report, that anything occurred? And there isn't. There simply is no evidence. I would like to respond to something about Colonel Halt talking about the idea that the Air Force never contacted him or investigated him, this incident. Since the closing of Blue Book in 1969, it has been official United States Air Force policy not to take a UFO report, pro, con, negative, or any otherwise. It actually is... Well, because it caused a great deal of bad publicity for the United States Air Force, and they didn't want to be involved with it. So the official policy is if someone calls up the Air Force about a UFO, they simply say, they refer the people to local law enforcement agencies without comment.
There's another area I want to cover, and we've got John Callahan been standing by, but you want to say something quickly?
Let's say one thing. Are you aware that the OSI did investigate this?
I am aware that the OSI investigated it. Of course, the OSI, of course, looks into anything very often that security police do, and I don't want to get into why that is.
What do you think, Jim, of the story of that Japan air cargo that saw the twin cylinders flying in formation?
Well, you have to look at what happened that night. He reported seeing initially a light following him. It's interesting that the direction he was looking was directly at Jupiter, which happened to be at its brightest that night. But all the radar targets that were reported that night, the FAA itself in its report says was transponder clutter and scatter, and the Air Force as well. But what's interesting is two airplanes that night, a United Airlines aircraft and a C-130 that were in the area, were asked to be vectored slightly off their courses so they could view the aircraft that night, and both of them flew near the aircraft that night and didn't see any target, any aircraft around the 747.
Let John Callahan respond. John?
Well, if you looked at the videotape that we took, you could see that there's a target. Every time the Japanese pilot said there was target at 12 o'clock or 2 o'clock, that we had a primary hit there. Our own...
Well, the FAA doesn't agree with that, sir.
Well, that's... you know, the FAA doesn't want to control UFOs. Just because they say it's not there, you got to remember now, if you were flying today and you looked out the window as a pilot and you said, hey, who's at my altitude, the first thing the control would think of is I got two together, and then he would say, can you tell me what kind of airplane it is? And you would say, yes, it looks like an F-105. And they would say, if you got some numbers, you can give me off it, and we'll track that guy down, and we'll fix him for good for being up there. And you would say, yeah, here's his tail number. Now, we can't do that with a UFO. When the pilot looked out there and he says, I have traffic out here, apparently the three Japanese pilots are also lying. It's funny that everybody that's involved...
I got to get a break, guys, but you're
Okay.
making a good point. We'll come back with our remaining moments. Just skim the surface. Don't go away.
They saw the planets, I think Saturn, was it Saturn? Jupiter, Jupiter. And that the CIA considers Jupiter classified. And that I guess the FAA official was told never to talk about the planet Jupiter. So that's interesting.
Let's get a call. Los Angeles. Hello.
Hello, good evening, Larry. How you guys doing tonight?
Fine. Quickly, go ahead.
What was the most recent sighting in the United States, and where was it, and who saw it?
Do we know, Fife?
O'Hare.
It was O'Hare, United Airlines O'Hare, right over the
O'Hare
airport.
Airport?
Yeah. There's a lot of press about it.
Yeah.
United Airlines pilots, crew, maintenance people on the ground.
I actually talked to a couple of the United Airlines personnel, and privately they admitted what they saw was a disc-shaped object, broad daylight, punched a hole through the clouds when it left. But they would not go on the record because they were debriefed by United Airlines, and the United Airlines said they would lose their job.
I remember it was headlines in the national news when it occurred.
James, they would have no point in lying, would they?
Are you you're asking me?
Yeah, why would the military officers, why would they lie?
Oh, I don't question that military officers are lying. I just doubt whether they're accurately seeing and reporting what they're seeing. And there are many. It's very easy to be fooled.
Yeah. All right, we've run out of time, but I thank you all.